Good afternoon, and welcome to the fourth lecture within the series 7 months, 7 universities, offered in the framework of subline 4.8 of Arqus. As you probably know, Arqus is a multilateral alliance of internationalized institutions who share academic, scientific, and cultural objectives, a common vision of the role of higher education and research, and mutual fields of interest. It brings together the universities of Bergen, Granada, Graz, Leipzig, Lyon, Padova, and Vilnius, 7 long-standing comprehensive research universities. The University of Bergen will host today's lecture, and it is a pleasure for me to give the floor, or rather, as she usually says, the screen, to Åsa Johnsen, also from the University of Bergen, who will introduce the lecture and the lecturers. If you have any question or comment, please write them on the chat and they will be answered at the end. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the lecture.
Thank you, Guadalupe, and hello to everyone from Bergen, Norway. I am happy to present you to the youngest university in the Arqus Alliance, the University of Bergen. We are celebrating only 75 years this year. Norway, University of Bergen has around 18,000 students and 4,000 employees. We have 7 faculties with education in most subject areas. Our focus area are marine research, climate and energy transition, and global challenges. Within the global challenges, we find migration, and the result of many years of migration into Norway has resulted in a multilingual society. There are around 150 languages spoken in the Norwegian schools, and this multilingualism is the topic for the research group I'm happy to present to you today. The research group, Multilingualism on My Mind, is led by Professor in German didactics, Åsta Haukås, and today she will present her research together with 2 of her PhD candidates, Irina Tiurikova and André Storto. They will present the result of their ongoing investigation on multilingualism among teenagers in lower secondary schools in Norway. In Norwegian, I would have given you the floor, the word, and in English, the floor, but as Guadalupe said, I will give you the screen. Please, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Åsa, for your kind introduction. And thank you also to the Arqus Alliance for inviting us to talk about our project, UNGSPRÅK. So we're waiting for the screen project to come up. So our project is called UNGSPRÅK, Exploring Students' Multilingualism in Lower Secondary School. We're interested in multilingualism, just like Åsa said, but it's maybe a bit strange that we only talk in English. Most of the time we publish in English, so we decided at least to keep the name of the project in Norwegian, and we actually made this word ourselves. UNGSPRÅK consists of 2 words, ung, meaning young, and språk, which means language or languages, and that relates to our teenagers and also to what extent they think they know one or multiple languages themselves. In our presentation today, we will not go into depth when it comes to theoretical background for our project. We will give an overview of the whole project and our plans also for future research. But if you would like to read more details about theory and approaches, we advise you to take a look at this recently published article in the Globe Journal. So a very important question to ask in our project is, who is multilingual in Norway? Åsa gave one introduction. Others have other definitions of who is the multilingual, and very often when you talk about multilinguals in Norway, people tend to refer to pupils with immigrant backgrounds or people who are born to parents with immigrant backgrounds. This is common in research, it's also common in the public debate, but our research team have a quite different standing on that topic because we think that all pupils in Norwegian schools are multilingual for several reasons. First of all pupils in Norway learn Norwegian and English from the first school year. So when they enter lower secondary school, they can communicate rather well in both languages, also because English is really present everywhere in Norwegian society. Furthermore, dialects are spoken everywhere in the Norwegian society. That's the fact in most other countries, but in Norway, you speak your dialect also if you are a politician, if you are in school, wherever you are, you should speak your dialect. So children are used to understanding and knowing that meaning is expressed in different ways from a very early age. Also, at the start of lower secondary school in school year 8, all pupils are given the opportunity to learn a second foreign language, so the L3 of the learners. And around 80% of the pupils decide to do this. So only on that background, I would say that all pupils in Norwegian school are multilingual. In addition, like Åsa said, an increasing number of pupils have other home languages or speak other languages with their families and friends. Around 18 or 19% of the pupil population. But do the pupils themselves identify as multilingual? How do they understand multilingualism and how is their multilingual identity? That's something we would like to explore in our project. So our project has 3 main areas of research. First of all, like I said earlier on now, pupils' multilingualism and multilingual identity, to investigate that, and also to what extent multilingualism and multilingual identity is connected with other variables such as gender, school grades, parents' backgrounds, and other factors. We're also interested in the interconnection between multilingualism, intercultural competence, and identity. And the third part is also very important to us, and that is to what extent participants can get involved in our research. There is a tendency in our field and also in other fields to go out in the world and collect data from pupils, from parents, from students, from others, and to publish results and research, but not really going back to the participants and share research with them and invite them to interact with the data. So that's the third part of our research project. Our project was planned to have 3 phases. In the first phase, that's in the pupils' school year 8, all pupils were invited to answer an online questionnaire. So that's the first round of data, and that generated a rich data set with around 600 participants. In the second phase, that was in this pupils' school years 9 and 10, then they are around 14 years old. That's in 2020. We wanted to go back to the pupils and present data to them and invite them to interact with the data. And from that also generate new data to ourselves, but also let them also get to know what we are researching about them, so to say. In this phase, we also wanted to get in touch with teachers to interview them about their views on multilingualism, intercultural competence, and identity, and also share research results with them. In the third phase, and that would be this spring, 2021, that's the last year of lower secondary school, we wanted to go back to all of the schools, 7 in total, and give them the questionnaire one more time and to see how their views on multilingualism and multilingual identity had developed. But unfortunately, as you all know, we are also in the pandemic here in Norway, and it has been very difficult to get access to the schools now. And also the answers of the pupils would not have been representative of a normal 3 school years, because a lot of the teaching in the foreign languages have been dropped actually because of the pandemic. So we have now unfortunately decided to leave out phase 3 and focus on phases 1 and 2 instead.
Further in our presentation, we will focus on the phase first of our project and will present some results. To explore students' multilingualism and multilingual identity, we developed an electronic questionnaire on UNGSPRÅK. And we should say that here we were inspired by a survey created by our colleagues in the MATES project and the University of Cambridge. The UNGSPRÅK questionnaire has 4 main sections. Section 1 was designed to study pupils' language habits and language use, and this section provides an overview of languages that pupils study in school and other languages that they know. It also gives an overview of how often, with whom, and in which situations pupils use their various languages. Section 2 includes 3 constructs that we consider as related to multilingualism and multilingual identity. And these constructs are beliefs about multilingualism, future multilingual self, and open-mindedness. Section 3 explores if pupils identify themselves as multilinguals, and they are also asked to define what it means to be multilingual for them and why they consider themselves as multilingual or not. Section 4 includes background questions about gender, travel experience, experience of living abroad, school grades, parents' education, migration background, and other factors that can influence their multilingualism and self-identification as multilingual. In order to facilitate the data collection and the data analysis, we decided to develop an electronic version, and for this we used the software SurveyExact. The questionnaire was available in 2 languages, Norwegian and English, and respondents were able to switch between languages when filling out the questionnaire. And here on this slide, you can see the first page of our electronic questionnaire. When recruiting the schools, we aimed for a combination of different socio-economic areas with varying linguistic variety. We also included schools from rural areas where pupils have nynorsk as their first variation of Norwegian. And in total, 593 pupils from 7 schools responded to the questionnaire. The data were collected during spring and summer 2019.
Yeah, for the next slide, or the next phase of the project, we're going to talk a little bit about pupils' definitions and self-identification as multilinguals. So in the questionnaire, at one point, we asked students to come up with their own definition of what they thought being multilingual is. And right after that, we asked them if they identify themselves with being multilingual. So the first question basically was the first type of data what we collected was textual data in this section, and they just completed this statement: to be multilingual means, and then after that they just take the answer: yes, I am multilingual; no, or I'm not sure. And subsequently we asked them to explain why they answered yes, no, or not sure. And this section here could be considered, let's say, as the core of our questionnaire for various reasons. The first one is that because we wanted to get a first-hand account of pupils about what they think being multilingual means, because we have a lot of definitions in academia, but we hardly ever hear from pupils what they think to be multilingual means. And also, based on their answers, we could somehow assess their self-identification based on the types of answers they provide. Yeah, so this was the main variable of our questionnaire. Yeah, and here's just to show you some results. 67, surprisingly, to us, 67% of the students answered they were multilingual. I say surprisingly because we were expecting the majority of the students to say that they were multilingual, but not that many students. So we were really surprised to see that a lot of students thought they were multilingual. And another, just a quick detail about data collection, we never mentioned the word multilingual before in the questionnaire. So of course they answered many questions about language habits, language practices, the languages they spoke in and out of school, but we never used the word explicitly, especially because the word flerspråklighet, which is the equivalent to multilingual in Norwegian educational context, as Åsta said before, is a word usually associated with students with immigrant backgrounds. So usually the students with immigrant backgrounds are multilingual. And also, in general, this term has the connotation that it's pupils who struggle to learn Norwegian or to struggle to learn Norwegian because of. So we wanted to also look into the what students thought. If it's just the students with immigrants backgrounds who are multilingual, or are there other students who consider themselves multilingual as well, given their linguistic repertoire?
Yes. To have a multilingual identity, to feel and be aware that you are multilingual can be empowering. And it's also likely that if you believe yourself that being multilingual has many advantages, that could motivate you to learn further languages. So one part of the questionnaire was to ask a number of statements that has been researched in the field, advantages of being multilingual, like cognitive advantages. Do you become smarter when you are multilingual? Can you make more money? Are you more intercultural competent? And is it easier to learn multiple languages when you are multilingual? And here are 3 of the statements. I will not show all of them, but these are perhaps the ones that are most interesting to us from a language learning perspective. And these were: the more languages you know, the easier it is to learn a new language. Learning new languages helps you to better understand the languages you already know. And knowing many languages helps you to see things in different ways. So as you can see here, the majority agreed to these statements. So they themselves believe that it's easier to learn further languages as soon as you are have knowledge of multiple languages. But also the last one is interesting because knowing many languages helps you to see things in different ways, may indicate that you are more open towards different perspectives of the world. We also looked into other details and differences between groups in the data set. We will get back to this in other publications. But it's interesting to note that pupils who said they knew 2 languages and pupils who knew 3 languages, there was no difference between these 2 groups when it comes to seeing being multilingual as advantageous. But quite interestingly, pupils with an immigrant background were more prone to say that there were advantages of being multilingual than others.
The next construct that we focused on is open-mindedness, and it can be defined as learners' open, unprejudiced, and positive attitudes towards diversity. And by this, we mean not only diversity across countries, but also diversity within different social groups. In our project, we wanted to understand how and if multilingualism and self-identification as multilingual can be linked to pupils' open-mindedness. And to measure open-mindedness, we introduced 10 items that participants should agree or disagree on based on Likert scale. For example, such statements as, I like that people have different opinions, or I like that there are differences between myself and other people. To see how pupils' multilingualism can be connected to their open-mindedness, we looked at the correlations between the following variables. First, between open-mindedness and the number of languages that pupils reported as languages that they know. And here it's interesting to mention that most of the students reported up to 5 languages as languages in their repertoire. And the most popular answer among students in Norwegian schools was 3 languages. Then we looked at the correlation between open-mindedness and self-identification as multilingual, which was explored with the question, are you multilingual? And we also looked at the correlation between open-mindedness and a number of other variables to understand which other factors can be significant. For example, gender, migration background, learning in L3 at school, active use of English outside school, parents' education, migration background, and other variables. And to see if there is any statistically significant difference between groups of pupils, for example, between those who reported more languages in their language repertoire and those who reported less languages, between boys and girls, we ran a series of tests, t-tests, and a Tukey test when it was applicable. And here are some interesting results that we got. You can see that pupils that identify themselves as multilingual scored higher on open-mindedness than those who do not. Girls scored higher than boys, and also a higher level of open-mindedness was found in pupils who have friends with home languages other than Norwegian, who actively use English outside school, who learn L3 at school, and who have higher grades in school subjects. And to our surprise, such factors as the number of languages in language repertoire, migration background, experience of living abroad, and parents' education did not show any statistical significance in relation to pupils' open-mindedness. And in many ways, these results parallel the findings of other studies in the field of intercultural psychology. For example, studies by Jean-Marc Dival, who shows that in the case of children, there is no connection between multilingualism and open-mindedness, while in the case of adult multilinguals, there is.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit more about the second phase of the project, which is basically it splits itself into two strains. Yeah. So first, I'm going to be talking about the interactive sessions with pupils, and then afterwards, Irina is going to present the interviews with teachers. So focusing on the interactive sessions with pupils. This is answering the questions or our interest in participants' involvement into research and multilingualism and multilingual identity. So how did we operationalize this? Yeah, so as we said before, we had like rich textual data from one of the questions in the questionnaire where pupils were asked to complete the statement. To be multilingual means. So we wanted to use this rich data set as input to the interactive sessions we developed with students. But before I explain to you how we did that, I want to talk about some implications of these sessions we had with students. So if we move on to the next slide. Yeah, so these interactive sessions where we presented research results from the questionnaire back to students is based on this one of our research questions. How can research and education be designed to engage participants with the research processes and findings? And how can participants' involvement in research contribute to a broader understanding of multilingualism and multilingual identity? So now I'm going to talk about what we call the 3 dimensions that underpin our interactive sessions, our feedback sessions with the students. The ethical, the epistemological, and the pedagogical dimension of these of these sessions. So starting with the ethical, the reason why we did these interactive sessions with students presenting data is because, as Åsta hinted before, hardly ever after we collect data, students in schools who literally open their doors to us, invite us in. We collect data, we publish data, we go to conferences, but they hardly ever hear from us again in general. So we wanted to make sure that we gave something back to the schools, because at the end of the day, it's their right to have access to the data and to the results they help generate. Yeah. So connected to this, there's also this epistemological dimension. As I said, sometimes we analyze data, researchers analyze data, they get to their own conclusions, but participants don't have the chance to question the findings or to learn from the findings or to expand their knowledge about the topic, in our case, multilingualism, multilingual identity, on the findings. So this epistemological dimension is not just to us as researchers, but also to the participants who have the chance to analyze research findings and discuss it. And a third dimension we see is the pedagogical one, in the sense that by promoting the discussion about multilingualism based on the data students generated, so we create this feedback where students reflect on their reflections, in a sense. We expect this to have some kind of pedagogical outcome, in the sense that by raising their awareness of the richness of their answers about multilingualism, or about the different possibilities of being multilingual in the world, this might change or might influence the language learning abilities, or the language learning investment in the future. So these three dimensions are somehow connected. So if we move on to the sessions itself, yeah. So these are the questions we wanted to, the practical questions we had to address. Yeah. So these are the intrinsic challenges of these sessions we conducted with the students, where we presented data. So the first one is how to present research findings to school children in such a way that they're actively engaged in exploring research data. In other words, rather than just presenting them with boring tables with numbers and results, and we wanted to produce to offer them something that they could explore, interact, and question the data. So another challenge, how to do this so that they have autonomy in interpreting the findings, rather than just we said, these are the results, these are your answers. We wanted them to build their own hypothesis, to explore the data, to draw their own conclusions about the data they help generate, and not just present it to them. Yeah. And the third question is how you do this so that their engagement, this people's engagement with the data, fosters a broader understanding of the phenomenon in question. In our case, multilingualism and multicultural, multilingualism and multilingual identity. So this is the next slide, gives you a visual idea of what happened. What you see at the top is phase one, were the two questions from the questionnaire. Yeah, so these are two screenshots taken from the questionnaire. The first one is to be multilingual means, and their textual answers, and the one on the right, are you multilingual, where they just had to mark yes, no, or not sure. What you see at the bottom is what we used in the interactive sessions. In other words, what these answers visually became. We worked with data visualizations for various reasons, to develop visual numerical literacy, because we thought this would be more appealing to students, to work with dynamic visualizations. But just to make this brief, this is what you see at the bottom is the visuals that we used in the interactions. So this is the visuals we used on phase two. I'm not going to spend too much time with the visuals on the right, because we don't have enough time to do this. So I'm going to focus on the visual at the bottom left, the bubble. So I'm going to share the screen with you and show you how this interactive visualization works. I hope you can all see it by now. It's So basically at the top you have to be multilingual means. So this is the visual students interacted with in the classroom. And all these answers here, all these categories correspond to their answers in the questionnaire. Yeah. So the concept of the visualization is very simple. It's big bubbles. It's small bubbles into big bubbles. So it's subcategories into bigger categories. So we analyzed all the students' answers to this question, to be multilingual means, and then we developed this visual. The bubbles on the left and on the right, they're static, so they don't move. So here the answers are just based on a semantic.
Sorry, André, but
Yeah.
we cannot really see the bubbles moving around yet, or the other one. So if you could try again, please.
So you cannot see anything.
We still see the PowerPoint presentation.
You still see the PowerPoint presentation. Let me see it if I can share it again. Can you see it now?
Yes, it is. Now it's fine. Thank you.
Now it's on. Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, so going back, so this is the visual we work with the students. Yeah. So this is the visuals containing their answers. So as I was saying, the categories on the left and the categories on the right were static. So they just represent their answers. To be multilingual means is to speak more than one language, or to be multilingual means is to know more than one language, more than two, more than three, etc. So these categories were static. On the right also we had static categories. What we did is what the students did in class, what we wanted them to do is to play around with this data. So we use the categories in the middle here. As you can see, you have different categories, about 10 categories that are not sorted. Yeah, that are not categorized. So what we wanted them to do is like play around with their own answers and sort out their answers into bigger categories, just like we did on the left and or on the right. So we developed this task. So students clicked here on Go to Task, and they had different bigger categories where they had to sort the smaller categories here. So some categories take just one bubble, like this one here, for example. Others take two, others take three. Yeah. But what's interesting here is actually their answers here in the middle, the answers they had to sort, because the answers are very rich. They cover different areas of multilingualism, and somehow the answers map onto to the way we approach multilingualism. We study multilingualism in academia. So we just wanted to find out how they sorted out their own answers. After they sorted their answers and created the bubbles, we asked them to explain why they sorted their answers this way. And also we got some very interesting answers from students. Why do they group these bubbles in certain different ways? After we did that, students could save their answers, and then they compared their categorizations with the way we categorize the answers in our research. So in this way, they were like playing, students were playing researchers for a day, creating their categories, building their hypothesis, and then comparing their answers to our answers. So these are our answers. And then the visual had a third level of interaction, which is after they compared their answers with ours and discussed, they had different prompts. They could act. They could read and interact and answer. So we asked them to choose one category they wanted to discuss, and write their answers on Survey Exact, on the questionnaire about. So just to give you an example, for example, this category here is using languages in the family. So we asked them, Many multilinguals use different languages in the family. Would you say that a person who uses only one language at home can also be multilingual, etc.? So they had these prompts they could interact with and deepen their understanding of multilingualism, multilingual identity based on their own answers. So yeah, this is more or less how the visual worked. So I'm going to stop sharing now and go back to the main presentation. Yeah. And here, just to give you some feedback, quick feedback on the interactive sessions with students. So these sessions, so originally our research happened, the questionnaire happened in 7 schools. These sessions were conducted in 1 school only for various reasons. The most obvious of them was the pandemics. Yeah. So the research was in one of the participant schools. We did it in 5 classes. In total, we had 114 students participating. When they answered the questionnaire, they were in year 8. When they interacted with the visuals I just showed you, they were in year 10 of ungdomsskola, which is lower secondary school. So these sessions happened a bit on December the 9th and 10th last year, and each session lasted for about an hour. So we had plenty of time for students to explore the visuals, ask questions, and interact with the research data. Yeah, and the type of data collected from these sessions. So we have visual sorting of the categories done by students. So when I showed you the bubbles and the way they sorted it, we recorded the results from their visual interaction. Then we had textual responses to the prompts. Those were those bubbles with the prompts about each category, which they answered in written text, and we save that on a server. And we also have notes taken by the researchers during the sessions to help us come up with better quality kind of data. We can triangulate data and get to better conclusions. Yeah, so this is more or less it about interactive sessions and the visuals. If you want to find more about the sessions and the visuals, I recommend you visit our website, Multilingualism on My Mind, and there you can find detailed information, and you also have access to the visuals and links to the visuals. The visuals are online, so it's open access. And now on to phase 2. Yeah.
The other topic that we were interested in within the second phase of our project is the intersection between multilingualism and intercultural competence in language learning. And to explore this issue, we conducted interviews with teachers of foreign languages, and our main research questions for this study were: how do teachers understand multilingualism and intercultural competence in relation to foreign language teaching, and to what extent and how do they see these two phenomena as interrelated? And the context of this study is related to the recent changes in the Norwegian curriculum. In August 2020, Norway started to implement a new curriculum for foreign languages, which in the Norwegian context are all foreign languages learned after English in Norwegian schools. In most cases, these languages are Spanish, German, and French, which are L3 for most of learners. The new curriculum has 4 core elements, and 2 of them are intercultural competence and language learning and multilingualism. Regarding multilingualism, the document states that this is a valuable resource in language learning and that all students are already multilingual when they start learning in L3 at school. And actually, this perspective reflects the findings of the first phase of the UNGSPRÅK project, where we showed that 67% of pupils in lower secondary schools identify themselves as multilingual. As for intercultural competence, the document links this to the knowledge of and an exploratory approach to other languages, cultures, lifestyles, and ways of thinking. And it also links intercultural competence to developing curiosity, understanding of cultural and linguistic diversity, both locally and globally. The document provides some descriptions of these elements. However, it doesn't provide any clear definitions, and as we know, both concepts can be defined in different ways. This makes the implementation of the new curriculum highly dependent on the views and beliefs of teachers who finally are supposed to implement new changes in real life. And given the importance of teachers' opinion, of teachers' views, the objective of this study was to explore how they perceive multilingualism and intercultural competence, and to what extent they see these two elements of language learning as interconnected. To answer our research questions, we conducted semi-structured interviews with 6 foreign language teachers. In interviews, we asked them about their understanding of intercultural competence and multilingualism, their views on the descriptions of those two elements in the curriculum, and in the final part, we asked if they see intercultural competence and multilingualism as interconnected and how. The participants were recruited from 5 lower secondary schools in Western Norway, and they were given an opportunity to participate digitally. An approximate duration of interview was 45 minutes each, and to analyze the data, we used a method of qualitative content analysis. So in connection to the first research question, we found out that all teachers except one defined being multilingual as knowing or speaking more than one language, and only one teacher argued that knowing 3 languages makes you truly multilingual. Several teachers also included the knowledge of dialects of both written variations of Norwegian, bokmål and nynorsk. Interesting to mention that one teacher also emphasized that being multilingual includes both linguistic as well as cultural knowledge. As for intercultural competence, teachers hesitated to formulate their thoughts regarding this concept. Nevertheless, all of them connected this to cultural knowledge, understood as knowledge of history, traditions, and social norms in L3 speaking country. The main difference in teachers' opinions, however, was in how they connected this cultural knowledge to other aspects. And for example, some teachers suggested that intercultural competence also relates to raising students' awareness about essential cultural differences between them and us, between language learners and L3 speakers. For example, one teacher suggested, you can tell that a French person is like this and a Norwegian person is like that. However, we should mention here that considering people different, essentially different based on their culture, refers to an essentialist perspective, which has danger of reproducing stereotypes and prejudice towards people from different national groups. And other teachers, we found out that they suggested other aspects as much more important for understanding intercultural competence. For example, they emphasized that mutual understanding in a dialogue, reflection on different lifestyles and identity are more important for conceptualizing intercultural competence. And it is also worth mentioning that one teacher made an explicit reference to a non-essentialist framework to intercultural competence. This teacher referred this competence to an ability to navigate any types of diversity, not only differences, but any type of diversity in social groups. She said, it doesn't have to do anything with if they are Swedish or Polish or English. We have different cultures, like the school, it is one culture, and a family has one culture. Culture doesn't have to be exotic. In connection to the second research question, our analysis showed that all teachers see multilingualism and intercultural competence to a certain extent interconnected. And the first way of seeing this interconnection is based on the idea that both elements refer to raising students' awareness of cultural and linguistic differences between various groups. However, most of the teachers mentioned that it should also concern not only differences, but also diversity, linguistic and cultural diversity in general, and not only between, but also within national contexts. And as an example, one teacher told us about an activity that she promotes in her class. For example, she tells her students about Verlan. This is a language of French youth, which is quite different from the standard French. I'm sorry. And the second way of seeing the intersection between multilingualism and intercultural competence is when teachers refer both elements to an ability to understand others, to be understood, and finding appropriate ways to communicate. The third way of connecting intercultural competence and multilingualism was to see that both elements are connected to metacognition and reflection on identity. And one teacher gave us the following comment: you have to have this meta focus in both areas. On the one hand, when learning a new language, you get to know yourself much better, how you're working, what kind of strategies you are using. And on the other hand, through reflection on your own and others' ways of living, you better understand yourself. So, concerning teachers' understanding of multilingualism, we can conclude that their beliefs to a large extent reflect the notions of multilingualism provided in the new curriculum for foreign languages. In general, they see their students as multilingual and also consider multilingualism as a resource. And regarding intercultural competence, we can conclude that while essentialist views still pursue among some teachers, most educators tend to have a non-essentialist perspective. And regarding the intersection between the two elements, we see that all teachers believe that multilingualism and intercultural competence, to a certain extent, are interconnected in language learning, and both include an exploratory approach to linguistic and cultural diversity, focus on mutual understanding, and for some teachers, both involve students' reflection on identity. And in our study, we suggest that a stronger focus on these elements can foster both multilingual and intercultural pedagogies and interconnection.
Yes, so that was a rather fast going through of the design of our research project UNGSPRÅK, and also giving you insights into some of our findings and approaches. These publications have either just been published or are in press and will come out soon. There are also 3 other publications in review right now, and we are also in the process of writing up more articles to come out this year or next year. What I would like to add towards the end is that this project is not only about researching multilingualism and multilingual identity, it's also an attempt to have another way to do a PhD education. Especially in the humanities, there is a tendency that the PhDs are in a way solo workers on their own, striving with their own projects. But this was an attempt to have teamwork from the very beginning and to do everything together and to develop a project together, publish together, and decide on research questions together, and to explore to what extent that can both increase the quality of the research that we are publishing, but also help struggling PhD who also too often feel left alone with their project. So thank you so much for listening, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you. And please follow our project. This is the link to our website.
Thank you very much, Åsta, Irina, and André. It was indeed very interesting. And now it's the time to our listeners to answer their questions, to see if there is any question in the audience. Or any comment, of course. It doesn't have to be a question. Yes, we've got a question from Joop Meuring from Leipzig. He wants to know if you could elaborate a bit more on the connection between multilingualism and school success. You mentioned that, and he thinks that it is very exciting.
I think, Irina, that was more your topic. You mentioned it briefly regarding open-mindedness.
Yeah, that was about open-mindedness. We looked at the interconnection between open-mindedness and a number of variables, such as number of languages that students reported as languages that they know. And we found out that students that actually it doesn't really matter how many languages students know. It's more important if they self-identify themselves as multilingual or not. So they show higher level of open-mindedness if they identify themselves as multilingual. And actually, this open-mindedness is also connected to their success in language learning, because those who study L3 at school and those who have higher degrees in language subjects, they have a higher level of open-mindedness. But in further articles, for sure, we will look at the interconnection, direct interconnection between multilingualism and self-identification as multilingual with their success in language learning at school.
Thank you, Irina. I don't know if there is any other question. I wanted to ask you myself, I guess you have different backgrounds. So I would like to ask where you are from, where you come from, and to what extent your background has influenced the project and the approach to the project, because I'm sure it probably did.
Yeah. So I am a native person from Norway and from Bergen. What about you, André? Where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from Brazil, but for me it's interesting to research multilingualism, because now we see this type of discourse, or this type of concern becoming very popular in schools and in societies in Europe. But Brazil has always been a multicultural, multilingual society. Brazil is a country made up of immigrants. So I have immigrant backgrounds. My great grandparents came from Italy and Portugal to Brazil, and this Brazil has a huge amount of different immigrants for various historical reasons and in different moments in time. So we kind of grew up in this multicultural environment with different kinds of food, languages, and yeah. So this is something that is quite natural to me. I mean, what I found weird is that people consider languages and cultures as something isolated, or I think multiculturalism and multilingualism is where everything started, and then we began to see languages and cultures as something separate or differentiable. Yeah.
And you, Irina?
Yeah, and I'm from the north of Russia. And if you look at the map, I'm from the town which is not so far from Norway, but actually it's quite far, because the trip takes like at least 10, 15 hours. This is about the scale of the country. And of course, I'm from the country which is highly multicultural and also multilingual, but of course, with the dominance of one culture and one language. Yeah, and I've been studying languages all my life, and also I have background in social sciences, and I worked with different theories of culture, multiculturalism. So for me, this project was an excellent opportunity to combine all my interests.
But even though we all share interest, we discovered in the beginning that it's not that we had exactly the same approaches or opinions about and beliefs about multilingualism. So that was an exciting part of the project, actually, to get to know each other's multilingualism, beliefs about multilingualism, and how to find a common way to agree upon what we understand as multilingualism, what is multilingual identity, and how to approach this. So I think this has been also a very enriching journey to ourselves, also to see and open up for different perspectives and exploring things together. So it's a multilingual team. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, you are a perfect example of interculturality also, not only multilingualism, but also, of course, culture. For me, I agree with André. There is no way to make a difference between language and culture. That's for clear. Well, we've got another question asking if you find any link between teachers' views about multilingualism and the pupils, the learners' view.
Yes, I think this is a question to me and also to Åsta. I will start. We found, actually to our surprise, we found that most of the teachers, they considered their students as multilingual as well, because as André mentioned when we were discussing our presentation, that we were quite surprised to see most of the students, like 67% of them, consider themselves of multilingual. Doesn't matter which background, like if they have migration background or not, they consider themselves as multilingual. And to our surprise, we also found out from the interviews that the majority of teachers, almost all of them, they consider their students as multilingual. And this is quite new in comparison to what Åsta found out in her previous research. Can you elaborate on this a little bit, Åsta?
Yes. So, as I said earlier also today, there is a tendency that teachers view only the pupils with immigrant backgrounds as multilingual. And I think that can be problematic, because in that way you single out one group and very often that group is also talked about in more problem-oriented terms. They are the ones we need to help. They are struggling. Instead of including pupils with multilingual backgrounds with all the other students who are also multilingual, and let all of them explore their language repertoires together and in a way discover each other's rich language repertoires in the classroom together, and in that way highlight the resources of all the pupils together. I think that's probably a more fruitful way of approaching and promoting multilingualism than only talking about one group as the multilinguals.
Exactly. Yeah. Can I just complement this answer, because the original question, if there's any connection between pupils and students' answers, but we found also that there's a very strong connection between pupils and researchers' views on multilingualism. When we started categorizing their answers, we realized that the way they approach multilingualism somehow maps onto our different approaches in academia to multilingualism. We have the social dimension in the answers, the family dimension, the proficiency. So how well do you need to know a language to be considered multilingual? The context. So multilinguals are people who use different languages in different contexts. Some students had even a more sophisticated view of language. Language is not just these traditional languages we talk about, but body language, sign language, etc. So they had a semiotic view of language. So we found out that their views and then their categories are really sophisticated and not simplistic. Yeah. So this is also a very interesting finding. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I don't know if there are any more questions. It is also interesting what you said about different conceptions of language, about thinking of body language as a different language. I guess we could go further researching on this, because maybe we could also talk about sign language, of course, which is another language. We could also talk maybe about, I'm thinking about music, for instance. It's another way of communicating. So yeah, mathematics. Mm-hmm. So that's really, well, there are so many ways of understanding language, of course.
Yeah, and it's interesting to find this in the data. It's not that many students said that, but it's there. It's in the data that some of them had this view, and also the question. Yeah, and also the question of dialects, which is very strong in Norway as well. because I think it's something we forgot to mention, that spoken dialects are very common in Norway, and they're encouraged in classroom contexts. So this is also something that came up in the data. Is the knowledge of a dialect important to your multilingualism? Does the fact that you speak a dialect make you more, can you say things in one dialect that you cannot say in another, for example? So all these things came up in the discussions in the sessions with the students. So it's a very interesting interaction we had. We learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Can I just share a funny little story from the classroom when we had these interactive sessions? Because this was perhaps the first time that they were given the chance to explore data that they had generated themselves, and that they were asked to try to categorize the different definitions. And then I heard, when I was observing in the classroom sitting at the back, that some of them said to the other ones, so now we are supposed to do the work for the researchers as well. So I didn't really see the point in doing the job for us to analyze all the data. So different perspectives, but that was some of you. Most of them really seem to enjoy doing this by themselves, and there were a lot of discussion.
Yeah, but I think he said that jokingly to, right? That student, I think he
Yeah.
He kind of, it was okay. Now we have to do their work. Now we have to categorize their answers. But it's and we have some very interesting anecdotes, things that happen in classroom, like and the creativity students have in finding answers in the visuals as well. Very interesting stories. Yeah.
Well, any more questions from the audience? I guess people are thinking about lunch now. Well, if there are no more questions, I think we leave it here. Thank you very much, Åsta, Irina, André, and of course, Åse and Marina, who are in the background. Also for the introduction, of course, and for the support, and Marina for the technical support as always. Thank you very much. We'll have our next lecture in this series in May. And as always, it will be announced before on the Arqus communication channels. Well, thank you again, everybody, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.
Okay.